news. I have some important news for you.
Interesting news.
It's Blake and Aaron's Spilling the Tea with Sandy.
K-Man's top news headlines of the day from CMR.
Morning, Sandy. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Blake. How are you?
We are good.
Awesome.
And Aaron.
Hello.
As well.
Yes, good morning, Blake and Aaron. I'm so used to just saying Blake.
I
You
know.
know?
you were
I
gone
was
for 2
gone
months.
for so I have to take that because I was gone for so long.
Yes. So good morning to everyone. The entire world right now just received some news that we are all watching carefully. The Queen's health seems to have taken a little bit of a turn, and the palace has made an announcement that she is under medical supervision at Balmoral after doctors became concerned for her health. Interestingly enough, she met with the new prime minister a couple days ago, and she was scheduled to have a Zoom call yesterday morning, and her physicians recommended that she actually not do the Zoom call, but instead get some rest. So I guess that was an indication that she probably wasn't feeling 100%. So they've said that following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended that she remain under medical supervision. And this is in the statement that has come out from the palace this morning. They say that she's comfortable and at Balmoral, and her immediate family have been notified of the situation as well. So she is 96 years old.
Yeah, we hear that the entire family is either there or on their way there. So Bobo, we were listening a little bit to Bobo prior to the show. And they were just they were alluding to the fact, and there's a lot of TV trucks there and reporters and alluding to the fact that just this might be the end of the life for the Queen. So now that's what they said. That's not what we're saying. Obviously, we hope that's just maybe she's just not feeling great, and she'll feel better.
Yeah, and she's got some really great genes, I must tell you.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens. We all
obviously you're right. The whole world watching. It's a big story this morning for sure.
Yeah.
So we will be monitoring the situation throughout the entire morning.
What else you got for us?
So another news. The Cayman Islands government, the Scholarship Secretariat and Education Ministry have announced that the grade requirement has been waived for undergrad scholarships. So this is, I guess, a bit of a reprieve and good news. The ministry has said that there will be a temporary waiver of grade requirements for students seeking to qualify for Education Council scholarships to begin their undergraduate studies in the fall of 2022, which is like now. But anyway, they just made this announcement saying that for their purposes, they understand, everything that went down with COVID, and that kids may have been under quite a bit of stress. And so they are willing to conditionally approve them to receive a scholarship for overseas undergraduate studies if they, just apply and I guess meet all the other criteria, but they don't have to worry about following the usual protocol of having to also submit grades.
Well, it's been a weird 2 years.
So
It's got to be hard, especially for kids that were starting school or were finishing school, trying to do that at home learning. I mean, I could only imagine trying to do like at home learning with my 6-year-old right now. We can barely do lessons together. I could not be the teacher.
Lots of distractions. At home.
Absolutely. So it also covers people who are doing their first year of A-levels, second year of A-levels, and students at UCCI, whether they're doing pre-college level studies or certificate level studies at Cayman Career Academy or UCCI. So if you have any, I guess, additional questions, you can certainly, check that out. So the UK has blocked Bermuda from legalizing marijuana.
Which is funny because now I see a story that apparently there's a referendum coming maybe next year.
Maybe we shouldn't waste our time.
I don't know.
Maybe we should not waste our time, I think is the story here. But anyway, yes, they have blocked it. They've refused to give them formal permission to enact a law to legalize and regulate marijuana.
Could they decriminalize it? Which obviously still doesn't solve the problem of the drugs.
Yeah, I think most jurisdictions have
or small.
Yeah, I think most jurisdictions have, some
legal.
provision now for like medical use and stuff like that, but full legal use of it, no.
Yeah, it's legal in Jamaica. You can have up to a certain
for
ounce
personal use. Yeah.
For personal use, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Jamaica's a free country.
Yeah.
Bermuda and the Cayman Islands are not.
That's interesting.
Wait, it's not a free country here? What do you mean?
How quick did
Well, we're overseas territory. Let's put it nicely.
We have laws.
Hold on. How quick? Kind of interesting. How quick did they go and rule on that in Bermuda? Like, was it like how long did it take for them to come in and intervene? Because we've had issues that they could have came to intervene in with issues here, but they haven't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, it just said that the lawmakers there approved. The lawmakers approved the cannabis legislation earlier in the year, but it was withheld for months because the government was waiting for the royal assent and they did not get it. So, yes.
Interesting.
So the Brits don't like smoking weed? Is that what you're saying? They don't.
Is it not criminalized there?
They don't want you smoking it.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Gotta keep us under control, apparently.
I don't know. I heard Boris Johnson had some pretty big parties.
You think Boris Johnson gets that hair just by waking up every day?
But the rules don't apply to him. I think
we've all heard that for sure.
Yeah, the rules don't apply to him. They just apply to everybody else.
Interesting. That's an interesting little development there.
Speaking of Bermuda, they're facing a Cat 2 hurricane right now, potentially Cat 3 by tomorrow night into Saturday. So it looks like it's going to skirt this Hurricane Earl. It's going to skirt a little bit to the east of Bermuda, so that'll be good for all the plants that they're growing there.
Well, not anymore.
Yeah.
Now they're just hidden.
That is true.
Hidden their,
we'll definitely keep an eye. I'm sure Kevin.
No, I'm joking.
Kevin Watler, local weatherman, will be keeping an eye on all those things for us as he continues to monitor the tropics.
Yep.
All right. We'll catch Sandy right
you guys
now.
Have a fabulous day.
Yep. And catch Sandy on Bobo 89.1 FM right now.
All right, folks. We've got a couple seconds left to get everything ready on our end. Good morning to everyone. Just sending out my notifications this morning so that everybody's aware we are live, honey chill. We are live and direct. Hope you guys had a good night. About 15 seconds left. Beautiful Thursday morning. About 5 seconds.
Peppermint, sorrel, ginger, beaver grass, or English. Get it ready. Your morning tea just got hotter.
Ooh, honey child.
On the cold, hard truth. Bobo 89.1 and Cayman's #1 talk show are bringing you morning talk like no one else. Monday Rewind, Impact Wednesdays, Caribbean Connections, and much more. Don't miss a beat with what's happening in the local community. Just keep sipping your tea.
What a mess.
Here's your host, live and direct from the Cayman Islands, Sandy Hill.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this Thursday morning. Of course, the entire world is receiving news that Queen Elizabeth II is at Balmoral and is being watched. It looks like it's not a good situation because we have everyone pretty much, Prince Charles and Camilla are it says that they've traveled to Balmoral, and then Prince William is on his way. Ironically, Prince Harry and Meghan just happened to be in the UK as well, so their timing might be impeccable, as the word can be used, I suppose, that they might just be there in time for her passing, which would be quite ironic. But we're going to go ahead and pull up the BBC stream here this morning. Just give me 1 second while I multitask and get this pulled out for you guys so that essentially we can watch this in the background at the exact same time that it is unfolding, because without a doubt, the media, the British media in particular, but I'm sure, the AP and other people are probably there watching this situation. So just give me 1 second here. Oh God. These stories are so sad about these little kids all over the world who have to leave their schooling because of the countries that they live in, having to marry men who are 3 and 4 times their age. Ugh, so disgusting. I'm sorry. I just turned on the feed and there was this commercial about it on. Ugh, very disturbing. All right. Give me 1 second here. So let me just see. Okay, we do have some guests that are scheduled to join us this morning, and we will be awaiting their appearance. So this is it. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, under medical supervision, is how they have it termed. But the Brits are very, very prim and proper. They're not going to say she's on death's door. The Americans would probably say that, but let's just have a little bit of a listen to exactly what's going on here.
After that announcement from Buckingham Palace that the Queen is now under medical supervision.
The palace don't normally issue bulletins on the Queen's health unless it's significant. I mean, the last time the sort of statement, as it were, came out of the blue was to let us know earlier this year that she'd been diagnosed with COVID. But on the whole, the view is if she's not undergoing some sort of hospital medical procedure, then these are private matters. So clearly, the fact that the palace have seen fit to put out a statement, it is grounds for concern. I mean, the fact she's comfortable, she's at Balmoral, where she's very much more relaxed at Balmoral than probably anywhere else. I mean, that's a positive. But I think, echoing the words of the Speaker, I think all our thoughts will be with her at this time.
And Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, has said the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. She's added, "My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time." She has sort of pulled away from the public eye, hasn't she, because of those concerns around her mobility. But nonetheless, of course, she has been absolutely central this week to what has been happening in terms of the politics and the new Prime Minister and the ceremony of that happening at Balmoral because of the concerns around her health.
Yes, I mean, this week we were reminded of our absolutely central role at the apex of our constitutional system. It is the Queen who appoints prime ministers, and that she was very, very keen and determined to undertake that particular duty. Obviously, in recent months, we've seen the Prince of Wales taking on more and more of her.
Right. So I'm making some adjustments so that our radio listeners can actually hear as well.
Commonwealth Day observation. He's frequently now, for several years now, taken her place at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday. So, little by little, he's taken on these key roles. But that central role.
All right, I think you should be able to hear now.
The Prime Minister, which goes to the absolute heart of our monarchy. She was determined to do that, and I think, that was. It was a demanding day because it's not just a case of a handshake and a photo. You've got to say goodbye to one Prime Minister, welcome another. There's a lot of toing and froing. There are sort of cameras coming in and out. It was a big day, and clearly, I think it has, left her, as the palace saying, under medical supervision. So I think there will be all sorts of speculation. But I think the two key things are that she is comfortable and she's where she's happiest.
Robert Hardman there, speaking to my colleague Joanna Gosling. Let's just, if you're just joining us, bring you that statement once again from Buckingham Palace that we had a little bit earlier on. And it simply says, after further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended that she remain under medical supervision. But the statement also says the Queen remains comfortable and she's at Balmoral, and Prince Charles is there with her. We gather that the Duke of Cambridge is also travelling to Balmoral to be with the Queen as well. And we can speak now to Anna Whitelock. She's a royal historian and a professor of the history of monarchy at City University in London. Well, of course, she has made history with the extraordinary longevity of her reign, hasn't she?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, a queen reigned for longer than 70 years. She's just, as Robert was saying, has just sworn in her 15th prime minister, her first being Winston Churchill. I mean, she spans the second half of the 20th century now into the 21st century. She has become so part of British identity. And I think whether people are supporters of the monarchy or not, this kind of news, just sort of rocks people because she is in many ways a rock. She's always been around. Most people haven't lived a life where she hasn't been queen. And certainly today with people around me, there is definitely a sense of, oh gosh, that's going to be odd, isn't it? And I think that just sums up really the kind of influence and impact she has beyond the very important role we saw her play swearing in Liz Truss as Prime Minister just the other day.
And that in itself was extraordinary because it was her 15th Prime Minister. And she smiled that unique smile of hers at the new 15th Prime Minister she has asked to form a government. The first, I think, Winston Churchill.
Yeah, Winston Churchill was the first. And, that was the first time that she had sworn in a new Prime Minister at Balmoral. And of course, that adjustment had been made because of the mobility issues, which we've known have affected the Queen for a long time. We know that she pulled out of the Privy Council meeting. And we know, the Queen is, as far as possible, it's business as usual. She would have absolutely been determined to be there to see the end of the Prime Minister period of Boris Johnson, to swear in Liz Truss. She didn't want to have anybody play the part for her. She didn't want to give that job to Prince Charles. She wanted to do it. But these are clearly, I think, very serious times. Buckingham Palace, again, as Robert suggested, they don't release news unless they have to, and they always try and give little away, really, as far as possible. So I think the fact that they have said what they have says quite a lot, and I think therefore we are looking, now at a sense of, decline in the Queen's health, and obviously that would suggest that perhaps, the end is not too long away, which is a remarkable thing just to say, really, having, commented on the Queen for such a long time, and it's such an event potentially now closer than some of us might have liked.
All right, folks. So we will certainly all be watching this situation as it develops with the rest of the world. Good morning to Miss Verdita. She has lived an amazing life, 96 years old. That's Queen Elizabeth II. Again, the palace has made an announcement this morning, morning for us, afternoon for them, that she's under medical supervision. Like I said, most of us would think, oh, well, that's not a big deal to be under medical supervision. But, for the palace to make such an announcement, everyone is in agreement that that's probably a sign that, she's really not doing well at all. And she could be on her deathbed, as we would say. So just a couple of days ago, she met with the new prime minister. And since then, I think it was yesterday, she was supposed to have a Zoom call, a Zoom meeting of some sort. Sorry. And her doctors recommended that she essentially rest and not attend the Zoom meeting. So working right up until the end, folks. That's Queen Elizabeth. So we will continue to keep you guys up to date in terms of what is happening with that situation. So yeah, I mean, everybody's got an end. And she has had an amazing 97 years without a doubt. So the protocols, I'm sure the palace is already in full mode in terms of, getting everything together for a official funeral and how those things will work, because they haven't had one for a reigning member of the monarchy for over 70 years, which is a really long time. That means that most people who probably work in that office, if not all of them, have never participated really in such an event. I mean, obviously they would have buried like the Queen Mom, and Princess Diana sort of had some sort of an official funeral, but none of them would have been the reigning queen. So good morning to Nordia. Good morning to Alice. Scott has got it locked here this beautiful morning. Scott, I'm hoping to see you tomorrow, but happy Thursday. I'll be going over at Waffle Monkeys to get my Friday fix of curry chicken and waffle. Good morning to Wee Wee. That's like definitely my cheat day. Louis, so good to see you here this morning, joining us from Detroit. Marshall is also here. Romelia joining us. Good morning to you. Miss Ann says the Queen is under medical supervision. Yes, ma'am. We're on it. We had it posted up on CMR within minutes of getting the news. So I think Renee is actually working on a story for the website, because I'm aware that some people don't necessarily have social media and they rely more on the website. So we try to cover for all sort of major events, all that. So good morning to Olivia. Miss Juanita's got it locked. Janet, how are you? So good to see you this morning. Barbara's here. So what a fantastic show we had yesterday. I hope you guys were able to tune in. Hero Blair says, let's focus our thoughts and prayers on Her Majesty today. Louise says, long live Her Majesty. God is still in control. Yes, well, I think indeed she has lived a long life, and nobody lives forever. So 96 years is pretty good. And, she's had pretty good health right up until that point as well. It is, it is what it is. So we'll continue to monitor the situation. Let's see what this gentleman here is saying.
Her well-being, the fact that it is saying that the doctors are concerned, though they say she remains comfortable at Balmoral. The fact that the immediate family members are gathering at Balmoral. Prince Charles, who of course is staying on the Balmoral estate at Birkhall, he's travelling over and has been regularly going to see his mother whilst he's been there. But the fact, I think, that says most is the fact that Prince William is flying up to Balmoral from the south. So I think, all in all, this is a very somber moment. I think, as politicians are saying, there is profound concern. I think it was Nicola Sturgeon who used that phrase, and I think that that is absolutely right, and other politicians echoing that sentiment. Hoping for the best, but let's be completely candid now, braced for the worst. It may be that there will be a recovery, but there has been a gradual deterioration in her health from everything that we can glean, from everything that we can observe over these recent months. The big change happened last October, the day that she cancelled the trip to Northern Ireland, and she was brought into hospital and stayed in hospital overnight. And that was the moment when it became apparent that there was something going on that we had not been aware of. Now, we know that there have been subsequent hospital visits. They have all been as outpatients, just brief hospital visits. And I think Hugh Pym put his finger on it, although there is this mobility issue, and we can speculate about what that might be. The key question is whether there is any underlying condition that has not been admitted to. And there have been many rumours over recent weeks and months. It is impossible to say with any certainty whether any of those rumours of an underlying condition are correct. But clearly we have now reached a point where the royal doctors feel that it is necessary to say that they are concerned. And that sends, I think, a very clear signal to the country, to everyone really, that we're in a developing situation. And I think everyone can and must draw their own conclusions from the facts as we know them.
All right, folks. So we're going to continue monitoring this situation. KK wants to know, if she passes, do we get a holiday? KK, not so sure that that's the right answer, right question that we should be asking right now. But I don't know if we get a holiday. Yes, that's a question that I'm afraid I can't even think about, to be quite honest. I don't know. KK is like, let me talk about the stuff that matters to me. Are we going to get a holiday or what? Ay. What a mess. Y'all. Miss Barbara says that, so I'm stuck in traffic coming from Breakers. My husband is in the ambulance somewhere ahead, as we're not allowed to drive behind the ambulance any speed at all. I would be ticketed if I drove behind the ambulance. Please note that he's also the patient of the health specialist at Health City. This is really, really stinks. Please pray for him. So any particular reason, Barbara, why he's not going to Health City? Because, morning traffic to get him from Breakers to Georgetown Hospital, my God, that might take a minute. And if he's a heart patient, why don't they just take him to Health City? Sounds a bit like the issues that we've been discussing just the other day. John says, God save the Queen. Good morning to Miss Sheila. KK says, oh, that's your husband in the ambulance. I would have been right behind him. Others do it. You're not doing anything wrong. Well, in this morning traffic, it's going to probably be near impossible for you to be following an ambulance at an event, because people have to pull over for the ambulance, but they don't have to pull over for anybody else. So, yep. So people are already sending me links in terms of what to expect when Queen Elizabeth passes. And it looks like we may be on the verge now of that happening. So we will monitor the situation. So Jonathan says, that's a good question. Are we going to get a holiday out of this? So we have multiple sources here for news. We've got Great Britain news. Out of the UK, we have Euronews. We've got Sky News, and pretty much everyone is carrying this story this morning. I'm sure, as well as the American news stations as well. Mm-hmm. All right. Jonathan is asking about the car fire tomorrow. Jonathan, that will be one of our topics that we'll be focusing on, or yesterday, sorry. That will be one of the topics that we'll be focusing on tomorrow's program. So essentially today we do have guests that are going to be joining us shortly from the National Roads Authority, and they will be discussing the East-West Arterial and all the developments in terms of that. And they say that they actually want to put some rumors to bed as well. So they'll be joining us. And then on tomorrow's program, we're going to talk about that car fire. But yes, if you've been watching the news, there was a huge car fire yesterday morning in the Prospect area off of Mangrove Avenue. And it was quite, the smoke was billowing all over the place. There were people who actually thought that it was a house that was on fire, because that's how huge it looked. And I had people calling me saying, "Oh my gosh, Sandy, you know, what's going on here?" Worried about their homes. They're like, "Oh, I've got a dog at home and I live in that area. What is it?" So we've gotten quite a bit of information about that fire, with some people saying, in fact, that it was very much preventable and there had been complaints about that person for some time. So we're going to have a look at that situation so that we can bring you guys up to speed. Unbelievable. So much in life is preventable, but we just sit here and let it happen. So as I said, pretty much everyone around the world is watching the situation at the in the UK this morning. So we will continue to do so. So again, the palace has made an announcement that the Queen is under medical supervision. And
for the Queen's family, and especially because we saw the Queen so sprightly in welcoming the new Prime Minister, and for her children to be gathering at Balmoral on the advice of those who have medical care for Her Majesty. This is quite a significant moment, and it is a matter of great concern for that family, and of course for the nation and for other nations who look to the Queen as their head of state or as head of the Commonwealth, because undoubtedly this is a difficult time, and for the family who now need to focus on being with Her Majesty.
So declining health, probably for a while. And so, it's one of those things that that the family is going to have to deal with this morning. So again, Barbara, just clarifying the situation with her husband, says he does not seem to be heart related. They said, well, okay, but he's 66 years old and he's been having pains from about 2:00 this morning. I tried to make it to the hospital myself because we live in East End, but I could not make it due to traffic. I finally gave up and called the ambulance because he was having so much pain. And again, this certainly highlights, she says that they have Cineco. This highlights the conversation that we have been having, the need for the government to not just recognize the license and authorization that they have given Health City to, act as an emergency and trauma center and take such emergencies, but they actually should probably start utilizing the facility. And they seem to be under the misguided I guess impression, or I don't know what to call it really, but they have misinformation saying that Health City doesn't have approval when in fact they have, and I've seen the license for myself. And I don't know why government wouldn't know that, because it's like a government board that approves medical facilities. So how hard could it be to call the medical and dental council here in the Cayman Islands and just confirm that they do have a license for emergencies and trauma? So I don't know what's going on over there, but it seems like, the government needs to really get it together in this front, because time can be really, really critical when it comes to these sorts of things. So yes, they have a whole section that you can go and have a look at on the website in terms of who has a license, who's been licensed. And yeah. I must say that they're not the Medical and Dental Council, they're not very good at responding to correspondence, because I'm pretty sure that we've sent them something before and they simply have not responded to that. So it would be great if they would. But there you have it. So they do have, just trying to remember where the link is for who's approved by them. But they do have a list somewhere on the website. I just can't remember right now. These websites are not always the easiest to find. You think that would be something that you could just immediately find as you go to the website, like all the institutions in the Cayman Islands and what they're approved for. But I'm trying to have a look for it now, and it seems to be eluding me, to say the least. But it is somewhere because I've seen it already. I'll see if I can put my fingers on it again. That is there somewhere. So yes, Miss Barbara, wishing your husband well. And again, someone should be listening because Pauline, good morning. Carmelie's here. She says, oh, my prayers go out to her family and friends. Good morning to Miss Morna. KK says HSA is an animal hospital. Oh gosh, no. They need to stop going by, you have to be referred, accept the people. It's disgusting. People's lives can be saved if it wasn't for some of those who call rules they put in place. Tracy, good morning, says, I hope that Prince Harry gets to see his grandmother whilst in Europe to make peace with her before her passing. God save the Queen. Yeah, like I said earlier, it's quite ironic because him and Meghan are actually in the UK at the moment. So Irvlin says that he was never at war with his grandmother. Yeah, I don't think his issues were with her at all. Obviously he's had some issues with the institution of the monarchy, but I don't think that his grandmother, although she's part of that institution, the two of them have met in more recent times. And in fact, I think he's met with his grandmother even sooner, if you will, than he has met with, sooner than he's met with other members, including his brother. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. All right. So let me just see. Oh, okay. We got to switch back to BBC because I think they're getting the news quicker than anybody else. So give me 1 second. I'm told that we may have a development. So give me 1 second here. Yay. Um, somebody else is saying that BBC One is off air to news and they're all wearing black and probably some incoming bad news. So we'll continue to monitor the situation this morning. Another person has given an update, Miss Barbara. They said that they just saw an ambulance drive on Smith Road. So they're hoping that maybe that's your husband and he is not too far from the hospital this morning. So getting some real-time updates for you, Miss Barbara. So hopefully that's helpful. So Miss Darlene says, I agree with Tracy. Hopefully Harry will reach out to her. I think it's a little bit late now for that, Miss Darlene and others. I mean, if she is literally on her deathbed, this isn't the time to have a heart-to-heart conversation about what might have happened, with their relationship or with the relationship with the institution. It's, I think the point that they're trying to make this morning is if this announcement has been made and the immediate family is traveling to see her, who knows if she's even, they said she's resting comfortably, but who knows if she's even conscious. But I seriously doubt she would be in a position to be having a heart-to-heart conversation with Harry or anybody else at this time. Some thoughts coming in about this animosity in the royal family. We'll leave that for now. So Ms. Barbara, if we get any further updates, hopefully you're not too far behind the ambulance yourself. I'm not sure where you're stuck in traffic, but we'll continue to update. And yes, folks, we will continue to also monitor the situation at Buckingham Palace, or my apologies, at Balmoral this morning in relation to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's health. It seems like it's going to be quite a situation this morning. Okay, we do have the National Roads Authority that is joining us, so we'll go ahead and bring our guests into the program. So good morning. We have the head of the NRA, Mr. Edward, and we also have Marianne Pandui. So sorry, Mr. Edward Howard, Marianne Pandui, and then we also have Alric Lindsay, who's going to be joining us on another stream as well. So good morning, all. So good to see you guys today.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
All right. So we are going to be having a discussion with the National Roads Authority this morning, primarily about the East-West Arterial. They want to just clear up some bit of misinformation that has been in circulation and just kind of bring us up to date on where this project is at, why we're even doing this, I suppose, at the end of the day as well. And if you have any questions in relation to this, you can join the live stream, or you can certainly join on the phone at 936-BOBO. That's 936-2626. So where shall we begin? Mr. Howard, maybe we'll start with you this morning, giving us a little bit of information on sort of the history, because I feel like this project has been in the works for a really, really long time. And now it looks like it's getting a lot closer to becoming a reality. So give us a bit of a historical development of how we've gotten to this point.
Yes. So good morning, everyone, to your listening audience this morning. And it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And I'll just start out by saying that this whole East-West Arterial, really the genesis of it started back in around 2004, just after 2004, when we had Hurricane Ivan. And we immediately came to the realization of the sort of vulnerabilities that existed on the island. I recall at the time I was living in Bordentown, just below sort of Mauston's gas station, for those people who are familiar with that area. And that was one of the areas that was cut off during Hurricane Ivan. And then we also had at the area that they call lower end of the bay in East End was another area that was severely impacted. We had areas like South Sound, and they were also severely impacted just by the sheer sort of inundation of the waves and how it affected the roads on the coastline. So getting together with the politicians at the time, we realized that we really had an issue in terms of sort of not just climate resiliency, but the infrastructure on a whole was very vulnerable to storm events. And as also then the other issue we had was the fact that we had a growing traffic problem. And then we had most of our development then started to occur out east. So we saw trends with that. And then looking at the zoning, we also saw that the way the island was zoned and the way it was growing, that the growth was actually going to be, future growth was going to be more in the eastern district. So we really realized that there was need for sort of a central highway. And that was when we sort of started to pen, what that central highway would look like. Initially, it was called the Central Highway, but then it sort of garnered the name East-West Arterial as time went on. In May, I think it was May 11th, 2005, we did what's called a Section 26 Gazette under the Roads Law, or Roads Act. But what that is that allows the government to basically develop a long-range plan or corridor. So it's essentially under the law, it's an amendment to the development plan that allows for future road corridors, and that's when we actually put that in. So 2005 is really the genesis of the East-West Arterial, and yeah.
Wow. So it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, and just to add to that, too, what as developments, and it was a good thing we actually did that, because as developments came online, what it did was allowed landowners in the area to sort of say, okay, well, this is what the government plans, so this is how they plan to develop the network. So it allows people to sort of base their plans around it, to say this is going to be the main conduit that's going to not only carry traffic, but create this this sustainable network for the future. And that's kind of where we've been since then. Since that time, there have been any number of developers that have come on board and sort of geared their plans or bought properties and stuff in relation to this corridor. So that's something to bear in mind as we go through our discussions this morning as well.
So some 17 years in the making, folks. Good morning to all of you. So again, if you have any questions for the National Roads Authority, do feel free to call in, or you can certainly post them on here. But we're going to be primarily discussing this morning the East-West Arterial is what it's now being called. But thank you for that very, very useful rundown, Mr. Howard, on where we are and how we've sort of gotten here. And many, many years ago, I remember even on the political arm, those persons saying that the Eastern districts, and specifically what was considered the district of Bodden Town, is the fastest growing district in terms of growth, homes going in. And, I live on the eastern side, Savannah, Newlands area, for many, many years. And we know that there's been a lot of, new developments, whether it's a Frank Hall development that can put up anywhere from 100 to 300 homes in neighborhoods, and that expansion continues. So give us an idea of how this is going to help alleviate some of the traffic woes that we are currently facing.
Yeah, so once again, if you, and that's a good point that you make. So the way roads were developed in Cayman over the years was essentially what we had were just coastal sort of trailway. And I remember my grandma telling me that, it was basically the donkey trails up through Bodden Town and all the way up through Breakers and up to East End. And as the island started to, because there wasn't enough sort of equipment and, access to those types of things to develop inward. So a lot of the way Cayman developed was, we stuck mainly to the coastline, and that's the way we developed and so forth. But as the island grew and we had the capability then to move inward, that's when you saw a lot of the major subdivisions started to develop inward. However, everything then basically accessed back to these coastal roads. So even through like the Bodden Town area, you have sections of that road that are just barely 26 feet wide. You don't even have room for sidewalks and different things like that, or proper shoulders and so forth. And it was because as government came along, they basically took land from those owners along the coast and widened as much as possible. Some people may go back and say, well, they should have taken more at the time, but it was just basically not having the I don't want to say foresight, but the realization that the island could grow to this level that it has. So they took as much as they could at the time. So what we ended up with is our primary arterial heading east of Savannah Newlands is essentially just in most cases just a 30-foot road that is supposed to service all of the potential landmass that's, the growth that's out in the eastern districts, and that's just totally inadequate. So we've been in this situation of having to play catch up for quite some time. Now, some people might say that, maybe it's not an issue of us having to play catch up. It's maybe an issue of us, perhaps we're developing too fast. And that's the discussion that you'll hear, as we start to go into this whole issue about the East-West Arterial. There'll be a lot of people who will pose that question. But being as it may, our role is to look at development trends and look at what's happening and where people are developing. And so we have access to just about everything that's coming on board in terms of planning applications and so forth. We know that much more in advance than the public does. So we're able to plan our road network based on that information. And then we also use the zoning. So if, the development plan and the way the island is zoned, we know which areas are residential, which areas are potentially hotel tourism. And the way our island is zoned currently, we do have areas for that out east. So there are areas where, especially around by the Moritz and those Tortuga and those places, those are areas that can develop in the future. And then we also have a lot of residential that still remains untapped out in the eastern district. So when you think about the way the island is going to develop, when you think about housing and where people are going to live, all signs are pointing to the eastern districts as the place where that's going to occur more rapidly than anywhere else.
Just want to jump in there. Edward is making some very good points. And the reason that they're so good is that it just reminds us that if the development plan had been updated, every 5 years as anticipated, then the development plan would have taken into account the possible growth in Bodden Town and different areas that Edward is mentioning. So it's not for the NRA to get into the politics of a development plan. It's really for the government to discuss those things. So all the NRA can do is operate on the data that it has and operate on any directives that it receives, from the government. So it's a very excellent point being made by Edward, that the catch-up game is really a result of development plans not being updated on a timely basis. So I don't know. None of us knows, what decision is going to be taken in terms of a long-term sustainable development plan. From the NRA perspective, we're still waiting to hear what the government decides. Like I said, we can't get into the politics of it, but just excellent points. I just wanted to highlight that while Edward was talking.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. So 17 years in the making. Now we're at the stage where after some 17 years, Edward, the NRA is taking, I guess, the formal steps to actually get the process started. So what does that now include? I mean, you talked about notices that have been sent out. So I suppose all impacted landowners have received their respective notices by law that are required. And then where do we go from here? We hear concerns, for example, being raised about the environmental impact. Is it too late now for public consultation? Have we passed that stage?
So Edward, let me take that for you, Edward.
Yes, I was going to suggest you do.
So I think we have to take a few steps back and try to understand why assessments are done. I think it's important just to speak in plain language, because what the NRA wants is as many people as possible understanding the process. Because what happens sometimes is, how sometimes people talk in all these complex terms, and then you can't follow, right? So one of the things I like people to understand is the reason for the assessment. So the first step is whenever there's a major project, like coastal works development, a large subdivision, a new hotel, excavation, or infrastructure, in this case, a new road, what happens is the National Conservation Council will look at the proposal and determine whether or not an assessment of the impacts on the environment, call it EIA, must be done before the project is completed. So to do this assessment to determine the impacts, what NCC does is it completes what is known as a screening opinion. So in simple terms, the NCC will screen or examine the characteristics, the location, and potential impacts of the proposed development. So to break that down further, when we talk about characteristics, location, and potential impacts, first we look at characteristics. What are those characteristics? We look at the size of the development, whether any pollution will be caused, etc. When we look at location, we look at the environmental sensitivity of the area. We look at the existing land use. We look at whether it's in a protected area or it's in the wetlands in this case. And then when we look at sort of the characteristics of potential impacts, we're looking at the probability that it might happen, the duration of impact, and whether those impacts can be reversed, basically. So that's a screening opinion. So looking at the characteristics, location, and potential impacts of proposed development. Now, the thing to understand here is that the Department of Environment is involved at every stage of this process. So if anyone had any doubts about the involvement of DOE, the DOE is very involved. So let me explain. As I explained earlier, the National Conservation Council will undertake to do a screening opinion. However, the National Conservation Council does not actually do the screening opinion themselves. What they do is they ask the DOE to do the screening opinion. That is, the National Conservation Council delegates the task to do a screening opinion to the DOE. So a part of this process, so the second step of this process is basically is once you have made a decision, once the DOE or NCC has made that decision, that a screening opinion is necessary, and the EIA is necessary because of the nature of the project. Then the next step is to say, can we identify those impacts that you've screened? So you say an assessment has to be done, but now we have to look a little deeper. We have to say, what are those likely impacts now? And when they do the likely impacts, it's done under something called a scoping opinion. So the scoping opinion will identify the environmental impacts that will likely be significant and which will need to be addressed by the consultant who is ultimately selected to do the environmental impact assessment on the East-West. So the scoping opinion would also speak to what technical competences are required of the consultant, which will be influenced by the scale and complexity of the project. But to decide on the consultants, the director of the Department of Environment chairs a subcommittee. This subcommittee is called the Environmental Assessment Board. Now, the DOE is chairing the Environmental Assessment Board to review the competency of a consultant. So what happens is up to 3 consultants are submitted to the EAB, chaired by the DOE. So then the DOE will basically look at the skills and experience of these proposed consultants, and then the Environmental Assessment Board will say, these guys, we think they're competent to do the job, right? So once the DOE is, okay with, 2 or 3 consultants, then what the NRA does is the NRA has its own little team now. So NRA has its own consultants team who will look at the people that the Environmental Assessment Board likes. So the NRA then selects one consultant from the consultants that the Environmental Assessment Board likes. However, that's not the end of the process. The NRA just can't award a contract to the consultant just because it likes it. There's a process to be followed. And that process involves the NRA getting the procurement committee involved. So that's another safeguard. So the NRA can't just award a contract to anyone. The procurement committee then formally in writing will approve the award of the contract. And the step after that for transparency for the public is for that details of the consultant to be published. So everyone will be aware of who the consultant is and sort of when their work will start. Now, you mentioned earlier, Sandra, about the availability of commentary from the public. Sure, this is what this new NRA board is minded to do, is have full transparency, provide as much information to the public as possible, hear what the public is saying and listen to their comments, respond to their comments. So it's not about anyone doing anything in a non-transparent manner. What Edward is doing, what Marion is doing, what the board is doing is operating a full transparent process. So what happens is this. The consultant collaborates with the Environmental Assessment Board, chaired by the DOE, and develops and refines the environmental impact assessment approach. At the end of this process, of this collaboration, a document is produced, and that is called a terms of reference. Now, the terms of reference is released to the public, and that starts the public consultation process. What's involved in this public consultation process? Well, I just mentioned the terms of reference are published, and a link to those terms will be placed on the DOE's website. And this has to be done for a period of 21 consecutive days. So notice of the publication in a public meeting to hear all your views, hear all public's views, must be placed in the press on separate occasions, within 10 days of the publication of the terms of reference. So now the Environmental Assessment Board, chaired by the DOE, will arrange a public venue, so that the terms of reference can be presented to the public. So the public will be allowed to submit their comments at that meeting, or the public can submit their comments in writing to the Environmental Assessment Board, obviously care of the DOE, by email, by hand, or by post. You can actually go by hand and deliver it to the Office of Department of Environment. So the National Conservation Council can also provide comments at this time. So the next step is once we've had all the public's comments, so the public is encouraged to come to these meetings to write, to monitor developments. Once we have the public's comments, the Environmental Assessment Board, chaired by the DOE, will work with the NRA's consultant to ensure that all relevant comments are reflected in the terms of reference. And also NRA will respond to any comments received, right? The important thing is for full transparency, all responses to this process will be attached to the terms of reference. Once the terms of reference are finalized by the Environmental Assessment Board, chaired by the DOE, the EIA will then officially start. So Sandra, I say all this to say that while an impression might be given that somehow, the NRA is going to not pay attention to the public's comments, there's actually a built-in safeguard where the DOE is involved at every stage of the process, and the NCC directive requires that a process be followed, and public consultation is mandatory. All your comments will be attached to the terms of reference. So I just want to clarify that NRA is operating on a full transparency. What Edward is doing, what Marion is doing, it's fully transparent.
Okay, so we see this is on your website, keymanroads.com. There's a file upload here about the East-West Arterial Woodland to Frank Sound portion of it. And it talks about phases 1, 1A, 2, and 3. So one observation that I'm going to make, I'm not sure who's best to answer this, is that it seems like although this has been sort of theoretically in the works for 17 years, why has it taken so long for us to even start with just phase 1, which is the environmental impact assessment? Is that not something that could have been done 10 years ago, since we've been thinking about this for 17 years? Or is that something that you can only do within a certain amount of time before the project is due to begin?
Sandra, I would say no, not necessarily, but I think, I guess to answer it in more broader terms, it really comes down to sort of political will. And if you will recall, I remember when I joined NRA and what was Public Works at the time, but a lot of the issues that we had at the time were more in the sort of central, the Georgetown area. And in fact, mostly on West Bay Road. I remember when we had the big congestion problem on West Bay Road. And so a lot of the focus was on that section of the island. And so what we developed over time was basically what was at the time was called the North-South Arterial, which then once the project was over, then we named it the Esterly Tibbetts Highway. So the focus was more intently on that. And I remember too, after Ivan passed, we were given the opportunity to be able to get through what was the old Hyatt Hotel. Because at the time, one of the major constraints that we had was trying to figure out a way that we could get a parallel road to West Bay, a road parallel to West Bay Road that will take us all the way into the West Bay area. And that hotel in particular was a major impediment. So we seized the opportunity at that time to be able to do that. So much of our focus had been on that area, on that section of the island.
I see.
Not to say that we totally ignored the eastern, but once we were able to deal with those traffic issues, then we started to turn our attention more than to the east-west arterial.
Okay. And so the construction date, it says, is slated for 2023, which is next year, to 2025. So how far are we with the various phases now? So phase 1, the environmental impact assessment, how far is that?
Okay, so we have just signed, just a matter about 3 weeks ago, just signed the agreement with the consultant to do the EIA. So we've gone through the procurement process, and the EIA consultant has been selected by the PPC, and agreement has been signed between NRA and the EIA consultant. We will let the public know more about that in coming days. The EIA consultant is actually a conglomeration of a number of different specialists. So it's not just one firm that's doing it, it's a number of firms. So a part of that consultancy group is, for example, a mangrove specialist, and then we have specialists in stormwater management. We have specialists in road design. We have people who are specialists in ecology and also environmental sciences. We've selected some of the top name firms from around the world. We've got people out of Canada, the US, even in the regional Caribbean region and so forth. So like the chairman alluded to earlier, the DOE has been a part of this selection process. They were actually made a part of the procurement process. So they're quite familiar with everyone who's a part of the team, and they've vetted the credentials of these persons. So we feel pretty confident that we have selected a really, really good group of persons that will be able to carry through this environmental impact assessment. In terms of them getting started, we think in earnest, they'll be able to start probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're meeting with them early next week to do a sort of a kickoff meeting, an internal kickoff meeting. And then they will then start to make their presence known on island and start to then work directly with the Environmental Assessment Board, which is chaired by the Director of Environment, Ms. Gina. So we're excited about that. That's going to get started soon. We believe that process will take just a little over 12 months. If all things, if everything goes well, that shouldn't take more than just over a year. What we have done on our end is to try to supplement and to try to speed up some of that, as well as we're doing our own we have our own consultants that we have engaged separately as well to help. Because we know specifically that some of the major issues coming out of this road development is going to be like one, for example, the major one is going to be stormwater management. How are we going to make sure that this road sort of marries contextually with the environment and doesn't create a dam, for example, in terms of stormwater. We also have a coastal engineer that's coming on board, a company called Beard, who's one of the renowned coastal engineers. So they're going to look at impacts of, say, hurricanes and so forth like that. What happens if we have another Ivan, or we have something major that will bring storm surge into the island? As you know, the way the island is developed, or the way the topography of the island, in most storms, and the older folks will tell you, like in the 32 storms and even in Ivan, what we saw was that when waves come across the island, then they do tend to find its way across and then over into the North Sound, depending on the trajectory of the storm. So we're flat enough in the sense that when hurricanes and stuff hit, water that's washed up on shore can find its way eventually across the island and over back into on the other side of the island. So things like that we'll look at. We'll also look at road ecology. There's been a lot of work done in like places like Canada. We look at examples in Louisiana, Florida, all those places where they've gone through this process before. So where people have built in like the Everglades and stuff like that. In fact, one of our specialists is a mangrove specialist out of Florida. And we actually have two persons who've done a lot of work in dealing with mangroves in the Florida area and so forth. So a wealth of experience on the teams, and they'll be able to guide us, work in concert with the EAB to make sure that we develop road plans that are what we call contextually sensitive to the environment. So that's exciting news on that front.
Thank you so much. Now, we do know that Alric Lindsay has to leave. Again, he's chairman of the National Roads Authority Board. Any final thoughts before you leave? I understand you've got another meeting that you must attend to.
Yes, we have an annual liquor licensing board meeting this morning, so I have to run over to that. I just wanted to reiterate, what Edward is saying is, it is a fully transparent process. And as he mentioned, there's even an environmental aspect of the consultant on our side. So it's not the picture that is sometimes painted of the NRA, that the NRA is not following a process. I just want to reiterate the NRA is following the process, which is set out under the NCC directive, and the NRA will continue to be transparent and invite the public for comments. I mean, I think this is what people ask for over the years. They ask for a process. and they asked for it to be transparent, and that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you.
All right, folks. So we'll continue the discussion with the head of the NRA and Miss Marian Pendu. Miss Marian, just remind us of your title over there at the NRA as well.
Oh, my title is a transportation planner over here at the NRA.
Transportation planner. So this question might be directed at you. Feel free here. So Jonathan says that the new road is simply for new development. It will not help traffic coming from the east in any way. So how do you respond? And I see Tracy also agreeing with him in terms of the alleviation of traffic. How do you respond to that? Did you get these similar comments, just as a secondary question, when you were forging forward with the Esterly Tibbetts into West Bay? Were people saying then that was not going to help alleviate traffic and that it was all just for development for big hotels and DART and everybody else?
Yes, absolutely, Sandy. And that sometimes is sometimes that is a fault of ours as well, because we have, like I said, we have the engineering knowledge, the expertise. But like a lot of times with experts, how we bring that across or how we share those what we know versus what the public knows sometimes isn't brought across in a clear way. And I say that, for example, we've had now since 2016, we've had an actual computerized traffic analysis model that we have at our disposal that actually tells us, in no uncertain terms, what allows us to do forecasts on traffic and so forth. And we put in a number of different scenarios. So we know how we're able to predict or forecast the way in which, traffic is going to be on the island in certain parts of the island. Now, just like when anyone would tell you, garbage in, garbage out. So we have taken great care to make sure that we feed into this model the appropriate socioeconomic data. In fact, the new census that just came out has had a number of different questions added to it specifically for the NRA to allow us to gain information on households and and even travel patterns, where people go, where people live, where people work, how just anything that we can get in terms of origin, destination. And then a lot of it, as we alluded to earlier, has to do with the zoning, the way that the island is zoned, and the way that that's going to have a big impact on traffic and how things are developed. So the person making the comment isn't entirely wrong. But it's really the real answer is that yes, roads are not the only solution, but roads are a part of the solution. So for example, if we mention things like, we hear it a lot, like you need to have public transport, you need to have all of these other facilities and so forth in place. But going back to what I mentioned earlier, if you only have one main road, just to think from in terms of Newlands all the way up to East End, if all you have is a single lane road, then, and you start adding buses to that and all that stuff like that, and that part of the island is developing, then what you end up with is a scenario that you get a lot of places in the US and other places where you have buses stuck in traffic. You see that even with your school buses, and then you'll start to see that with your city buses. So you need to be able to provide facilities for your public transport and for other things like your Uber or your taxis and so forth. Whatever mode of transport that we will have in the future, you need to have those alternative facilities in place for them. But one of the things in terms of, we'll talk about like quality of life, for example, going back to even areas like South Sound, going on up through Bordentown area, if you can imagine going up through the Bordentown area. If we continue to develop out east, then the quality of life is degraded for all of those persons. If you have to add another 10 or 15,000 trips to that daily, then what does it say to people who are living out east and living out in North Side that it takes them 2 hours to get to work? So they're inconvenienced, but so too are the people that live in Bordentown on those little narrow streets. They're also inconvenienced because then there's this conflict of persons who live in that area versus persons who are just sort of passing through. I will say that in terms of where we have to be careful is, and where we can actually sort of alleviate some of this, is like there's other options we can consider in also, in addition to providing additional capacity, is we need to think about, and COVID kind of gave us some examples of that, so little things like being able to work more from home, flex time, all these types of things, these solutions. We saw that these things, even where we put our schools and so forth, so these things are also things that will help with traffic in the future. So it's really, the way we see it, it's going to be a collection of different strategies that we'll have to employ. And even as we're talking here now, technology is one of those things that, it's just a prime example of how these things can work. I don't have to physically drive to be in a studio with you this morning.
Exactly.
I can stay right here. I could have done this from my home, and
absolutely.
There's lots of places, and we're
to
seeing
that,
it even now after.
No, sorry, I was
Sure,
just going to say, to that point, we actually had someone send that very message in. They said government and private sector companies need to allow true flexibility or work from home. There's no need for thousands of people to travel to Georgetown every day. And we do have a caller. If I can just pause you right there for one quick second. We do have a caller who's been patiently waiting on the line. Good morning, caller, and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And how are you doing?
Yes, very good. Very good. What are your thoughts this morning?
I'm just hoping that Mr. Howard don't use any of the engineers that they used to build that roundabout down there behind the old auto spa.
Which auto spa is that?
The one there
Red
on
Bay
Shamrock.
Road?
Correct.
Oh.
Remember years ago, just about every week you used to have people run off in the bushes before they fixed it. Because what used to happen is you used to have a negative camber on that road. It didn't have any soup. It had that negative super elevation. Sandy, Miss Sandy.
Yes, sir.
On a corner, you're supposed to have a positive super elevation. Catches. Next time I speak to you, I want to get the correct answer. I'm going to give you the correct answer now. So, super elevation is the rise or fall across the roadway. And it must be positive. If it's negative, you're going to run off. If it's negative, you're going to run off the road. You need to make sure it's. Have you ever gone to a speedway where you have car race?
Seen them on TV. Maybe been to one.
They have a positive. If it was negative, all those cars would run off the road, run off the highway, the speedway. So,
okay.
At the and this auto spot there, they had two negative things going for them. They had the road surface there. The road surface there was poorly built because the surface was so smooth that as it rained, the coefficient of friction was so slippery that the cars started sliding all over the place. But it's now good because they roughen the surface and they're not sliding over anymore. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to change the name of coefficient of friction. In our world, we call it drag factor. So if it's too low, you're going to start sliding all over the road. If you have light rain. If it's heavy rain, it washes all the film from the tires of the cars. So drivers, as it lightly rain, you're going to have cars sliding all over the road. So if you use the same engineers that built that, you're going to have problems. So try to don't use them. because we don't have problems.
All right. Well, thank you very much for those comments.
I don't know if you can remember. We saw
Yeah, Sandy, if I may just
Yes.
We need positive super elevation when going on the corner.
All right, my dear. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Good.
Okay.
So I guess the overarching question really, we got into roundabouts a little bit there. But
yeah. And I knew that would happen. Yeah.
What confidence do we have in the people who will be carrying out the actual construction?
Okay, well let me just address what the caller is was talking about, and I have to. He's really talking about geometric design and how you design intersections and in particular roundabouts. And what the caller may not be aware of is that there actually is. This is one of the things that's debated widely internationally in terms of how you design the camber or the slope of the roundabout. So that's when you're traversing into the roundabout, you will notice that some of them are actually a bowl shape, or concave versus a convex is what he's really talking about. So it's really a function or a discussion of engineering preference. And I will tell you where it all came from. Initially, when roundabouts were developed, the purpose for them was to act as a traffic calming measure. So the whole purpose of a roundabout was to basically, and you mostly found them in city centers where the speeds were low. So you found them in town centers, areas and neighborhoods where you wanted to slow traffic down. The caller is absolutely right that when you look at places like in velodromes and in NASCAR, where you have the races and so forth, you will recognize that those tracks are sloped inwards, and that allows vehicles to be able to stay on the road in a better manner to have better traction with the road. In France and other parts of Europe, the engineers started to sort of buck that trend and say, what if we turn the roundabouts the other way, the slope the other way? What that would do is would then force drivers to slow down or to navigate the roundabouts at a slower pace. So when you travel to places like France and so forth, you will find that 90% of their roundabouts are actually sloped outward. That's to help with drainage and then also to sort of force you to slow down. But to the caller's point, what we found is that hasn't been the best solution for us here. And so we've gone away from that. So the roundabout that he mentioned in particular, we took the opportunity during the COVID and so forth to redesign that and to change the camber inward so that you would present with a better driving experience going around that roundabout. The problem with doing that though is that what that does is invites higher speeds on the roundabouts. So that's one of the things that we have recently, we've noticed that we've sort of pushed a sort of education campaign to try to tell people roundabouts are not designed for 40, 50 miles an hour. Whenever you negotiate a roundabout, you really should be negotiating at speeds between 20 to 25 miles an hour because they're an intersection. They're not designed for you to be able to just speed right through. And that's one of the problems that we've been having. The other issue that we've been finding, even with our consultation with the police, is that, and a lot of persons probably wouldn't want to admit that, but he mentioned friction in road surface. And so what does happen is if any surface that you put down and then you've got, thousands of cars driving on it over the period, just like anything else, asphalt does wear after time. So we do monitor that now, and you'll see us sometimes we'll go and we'll cut out patches of the road and reinstate. And that sometimes is because the friction may have worn in certain areas. But the other issue that we're having is a lot of the accidents that a lot of people are driving around on ball tires. A lot of the accidents, even when we consult with the police, we'll find that one of the first checks they do is to check the tires on cars and so forth. And they'll find that a lot of folks for various reasons can't afford to have their tires and so forth up to date. So tire thread, all these types of things, suspensions, different things like that are all play a factor in how you're able to negotiate the roads. So I just wanted to throw that out, not to belabor the point, but just there's other factors involved, and we fully agree with the caller that but just to put his mind at ease that we won't be doing any more of those negative camber roundabouts. In fact, we're systematically eliminating those. I think there's only 2 left on island. So we're removing those. Not to say that they're incorrect. It's just a matter of engineering preference or principles that have been established over the years. So our aim going forward is to have all of them have a positive camber, which means that they have a bowl shape, not a.
And of course, the strips have been also put in to slow people down and to remind people with signage that you really need to slow down. All right, we do have a caller.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Let's just go ahead and take this caller. Caller, your question or comment this morning?
Morning.
Morning.
Your guest actually just sort of addressed what I was gonna say, but I'm gonna still say it anyhow, which is I'm glad to hear that he's not gonna follow France, because France for me stands for another word that I can't say on your radio show, and I think it would be reckless to have that negative incline and risk people's lives by people going off the road just because you want to force somebody to slow down. I think the better way to get somebody to slow down going through a roundabout is through education rather than risking their life by poor design.
Okay.
That's what I
agree.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. So again, folks, the takeaway here this morning is you need to slow down when you go into roundabouts in any event. Remember, they're not meant to be traversed with full speed. We do have some other questions. So we've got a couple road engineers in the house this morning, Tracy and others, giving a suggestion. They're saying, why aren't we building a bridge? So let me just find this suggestion here about, let me just see where this was, about a bridge. Let me just see here. Oh gosh, I've lost that one. But basically someone suggested putting in a bridge and having it run from, yes, I think it was Tracy, right. So she says, isn't it better to have a bridge on pilots in the North Sound with feeder roads? Why a lot of people suggest a bridge, but apparently I understand it's not a very practical solution for a number of different reasons. Can we just address what those reasons are this morning?
Sure.
And they make it sound, might I just say before you answer that, they make it sound as though a bridge is going to be less environmental impact and so much easier to do than the East-West Arterial. And to me, that's crazy. That's why I'm jokingly saying that they're all road engineers.
Yes. So, Sandy, that was my number 1 point. And then number 2 to that would be the cost of doing. So we've been looking at a lot of the causeways in the Miami area, Florida, because it's similar terrain, similar sort of limestone. And what we learned from FDOT, for example, is that the cost of doing a bridge or a causeway is 8 to 10 times more than doing an actual road on land. But the other thing too would be that if we were to do a bridge or causeway and so forth, then the economics of that, building that has to be funded some way. So that's going to lead then to the country having to pay tolls, different things like that. So you have to, because you have to be able to build it and also maintain it. So what they call is would be build, maintain, and operate. So the bridge or the causeway itself would become something that has to be operated via tolls, and that money would then be funneled into the road fund and be able to maintain it, because it's extremely costly to maintain those types of road systems.
And
I think most of you will realize
building in the ocean, I mean, we saw the concerns with a potential port expansion project disrupting, the ocean environment, and not really even fully understanding how what sort of long-term impact that could have had. In my mind, this would be a very similar undertaking in terms of the environmental concerns and the environmental impact. If you try to put in a bridge, it's not, the ocean is very, very different in terms of what you can put in it, in terms of, structure and building and,
Absolutely. Very much so. And the other thing I want to mention too is that if you were to put it in, so just imagine, just throw out a number, say it's 300 million to do it, right? You wouldn't get enough of the volume of traffic on it to be able for it to repay the cost of that. So in most places where you see those things go in, you have high volumes of traffic, and then the tolls that you pay for those things over time is what pays back for the cost of that infrastructure. So in our case, it would be, in most cases, let's take Highway 2000 in Jamaica, for example. Anyone who's familiar with that roadway, is they had a private financier come in and finance the building of this roadway. But the mechanism for what it allows, the private financiers then allowed to set up tolls on that roadway to be able to get money back, from the investment that they've made. So if we were to have someone do that here, the numbers the numbers are not there. So you wouldn't get the volume of traffic on it to be able to, because
to recoup their investment, basically.
To recoup the investment, exactly. Yeah. Unless we're willing to pay $50 tolls or something like that, just to cross it every day. But the numbers just aren't there. Yeah. So that's one reason as well.
All right, folks. So listen to the NRA. They are the experts after all. And, I think that sometimes when we throw out these suggestions, if we would do a little bit of research before we think that these things are such wonderful ideas. A lot of people are saying, oh, we don't want the Chinese coming and investing and having them take over because we'd have to issue the deed to all 3 islands for them to build us a bridge. Think about what it is that you are willing to give up for these, pie in the sky ideas. A bridge on a very, very superficial level sounds like a good idea, but work through it a little bit more. Romelia says, good morning, Marion and Edward. I personally want to thank the NRA for all that they've done in making our streets safe. So Romelia giving you some praise this morning. Thank you, Romelia. Joy Sam says, that is true. One day my car ran off the road with me and my mother. Thank God I was only doing like 30 miles. So again, slow down, folks, because you probably shouldn't even have been doing 30 miles going into a roundabout. Any reason why people want to fly through roundabouts? I mean, for me, I'm always like, especially if it's raining or there's anything else going on, like I really slow down to maybe like 15.
Yeah. But one of the things we do when we do road design is, so there is what's called a design speed. So the curvature of the roads and the slope and all this stuff is done based on empirical data that was done back in the 70s. On a lot of the old Ford Crown Victorias, the cars that were built way back in the day, that had really bad suspensions and all this sort of stuff. So a lot of the highway engineering guides that we use today, they were developed based on lots and lots of thousands and thousands of road tests done in cars from the 70s, 60s, and 70s. So the design curvature that we use, a lot of it. So let's just say we want to do a road and we want to post the speed at 30 miles an hour. What we will do is use these design guides, and this is not just us, but engineers all across the globe. They use these design manuals. But these design manuals, they will tell you, okay, you need a radius of 300 feet on a road bend in order for the car to operate at 30 miles an hour. Now that was based on vehicles from yesteryears. The vehicles today have much better suspension systems. Are able to. I mean, I've heard people brag about it. Oh, man, I can take that roundabout at 50 miles an hour. Some people try to drift around it in different things like that. So what I'm saying is that cars, the technology and the suspension systems and all that stuff, braking systems have become so much more improved that it's almost tempting for people to be able to try to navigate these things at a higher speed. So one of the things the commissioner highlighted a few weeks ago at one of the public meetings we had is that we have to bear in mind that none of our roads in Cayman are designed for speeds in excess of 50 miles an hour. Yet, from the data that they've seen, speed data and stuff, we've got people doing 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. They're sort of tempting fate on, highways, road systems that are not designed for those high speeds. This is not the Autobahn or some of these, motorways that you see in the UK and the US and so forth. These roads, like I said, were developed from what were essentially donkey trails and improved as best they can. In fact, a lot of the roadway systems that you have going out east, they still have really suspect design curvature on them because they were never, in order to fix those, we would have to acquire lots of land and widen and do all sorts of things to them. So it's important to remember that these roads are not designed for high speeds. The other thing to remember is that there's a lot of side friction. So side friction in traffic terms, what that means is that there's a lot of driveways, lots of interconnecting roads. So you really, really, really have to be mindful of that. That I remember, years and years ago when I had my license and stuff like that, but when I was driving, when I was living in Bordentown, you could instinctively drive at a certain speed because you knew the next road was Whale T, the next road was Beach Bay, the next road. That's not the case anymore. So what you have is homes that are directly on these roads. So there's driveway after driveway after driveway. Every 50 feet, every 100 feet, there's another driveway. And so cars are coming in and out from all different directions. We call that side friction. So we really, really have to take that into consideration. Plus, with the population increase, we're finding that more people are taking to the roads to walk, to cycle, all these types of things. So there's all this, there's this environment where there's all these different types of road users. So we have to bear that in mind. Now it begs the question, and we've discussed this on a number of fronts in terms of our road safety discussions that we have here, is whether we need to reduce speed limits all across the island. And I know that is something that will garner a lot of controversy in terms of whether that's something that is feasible. Let's just take the Grand Harbor area, for example. Now that we've widened to 6 lanes and all that stuff, and then you have people trying to cross the road. You have buses stopping to let workers off at Hurley's and all this sort of stuff, yet the speed limit remains at 40. That's an unsafe environment. So, should that be reduced down to 25 miles an hour? And can we realistically enforce 25 miles an hour? Because it's a much safer speed, but then it also adds to congestion and increase in your travel time. So these are the factors that we have to weigh into. But someone mentioned it earlier, and I think driver education is something that we need to really, really stress a lot, is that we have to be mindful of, because what we're also seeing is an increase in the number of sort of vehicle and pedestrian conflicts. So we're getting people being hit on bicycles, we're getting pedestrians being hit. And sometimes it's not always the motorist's fault, but sometimes it's pedestrians and cyclists also not using the roads correctly as well. So there's education that needs to be done. I'm kind of stepping on Marion's.
Well, because you see on it, there's a number of increases in the of crossings on the roads that we put down. A number increase of trying to incorporate sidewalks or verges on the roads. People can walk and ride their bike. Like on South Sound, we've done some work in that area to widen the shoulders. In Bordentown, just to give some clearance on the sides, people can walk, and or they do have the ability to have an issue, they can come off the road. But it's just to provide that space where people can not just use their vehicle, but they're able to, because some people actually use their bikes to get to work. You see that in the mornings with a lot of the construction work, especially on West Bay Road. They are riding their bikes to work, and that's their main mode of transportation. Not everybody uses their vehicle to get around, so we need to bear that in mind. And we're trying within our road designs over the past few years is to actually incorporate that within the design, so we're not just gearing toward the car, but we're also looking out for the other folks who need to get to work, like with them on their bikes or they're walking, etc. So you will see a number of increases in those types of the things on the designs within the road corridors, just the more crossings and bike lanes and things of that sort.
Yeah. And Sandy, we have no choice in that matter too, because even with the rising costs in fuel and different things like that, and and the sort of disparity that's happening economically, you are going to find more vulnerable road users. You're going to find a lot more people now taking bicycles, scooters, e-bikes. These are the types of things that are going to become more prevalent on our roadways. So we really, really have to push that safety message, that education message, that share the concept called share the road. Because that's, even myself, I'm, contemplating doing the same thing as well, sort of maybe getting an e-bike and different things like that. But there's this whole safety aspect where we don't have the infrastructure in a lot of places. And then also driver behavior is another thing, because you will be shocked to know that the number of people here culturally who don't respect cyclists and who think that bicycles are an annoyance. I've been cycling myself now for a better part of a year, and it's just amazing how people react to a person on a bicycle. It's like they just consider them to be an annoyance.
If they see them at all.
Types of attitudes,
yes,
if they see
absolutely.
them at all, those types of attitudes. Now, and again, on the reverse side of that, I've seen a lot of cyclists, I've seen a lot of pedestrians do things that are just mind-boggling, like they're riding in the wrong direction. They're crossing willy-nilly in traffic. They're not wearing proper clothing, not having proper lighting and gear on their cycles and so forth. So there's just this whole education aspect that needs to be explored. And it's not just an NRA thing. It's going to be a concerted effort between the NRA, the RCIPS,
or the traffic management panel that we're been talking about. The DVDL as well, our ministry, the police, and ourselves.
And the good citizens. The good citizens of this country who need to take some of this advice on board. So Ms. Sue says, slow down. We all wish that they would, and the trucks need to driving roundabouts. They don't care. El Rey says the reason why people don't slow down in roundabouts because it feels like they're NASCAR flying through the roundabouts. Good morning to Miss Bonnie. She says, good morning, Sandra. It's foolish to think about building a bridge. Eddie does have a question. He says, I'd like to know, why has the NRA repaved the 7-mile corridor this past year, knowing very well that we have large areas of stormwater settlement in front of shopping centers and hotels? Why were there no drain wells installed? And then he says that he goes on to say, the Georgetown revitalization team installed crosswalks by the courts and Parliament, thus causing water to pool and become a pedestrian and traffic hazard. Again, no planning.
Yeah, good point, Eddie. And absolutely right. And one of the biggest problems we have with stormwater and drainage in particular is that there was no sort of foresight and planning from the beginning. So we have are narrow corridors of road, but statutory undertakers or utility companies, they're called statutory undertakers in the law. They have a right to place their public utilities in the roadway. And then what often happens in a lot of cases is that there's conflict then between where certain things are placed. So for example, Cable and Wireless or Flow was one of the first major undertakers that were able to put their infrastructure in, we had the old landline telephones and stuff. So a lot of their infrastructure was in the road decades ago, right? So they have underground stuff that's in there. And then we had the fiber companies, the telecoms come along, and we've got any number of those who also have stuff in there. And then we have CUC with overhead lines and so forth. So in terms of now being able to put adequate storm drains in certain locations, we're not able to do that at certain points because it will be in conflict with, the water main or the or flow and different things like that. In fact, we've had instances where we've drilled through, trying to put stormwater thing. We've actually damaged telecoms. We've damaged water mains. These are things that, so over the years, we've developed a camaraderie with these different utilities, and we try to work out as best where we can place certain things. But yeah, it's trying to make the best of a bad situation. So along West Bay Road, for example, flow, we've got flow and I think 2 or 3 different telecoms, and then we've got the CUC lines that are overhead and so forth. So it becomes difficult to fit. Oh, and then we also got sewer. So it becomes difficult to fit in storm drains in certain locations. Yeah, so that is a challenge for us. Not having a dedicated, pathway or corridor to put in the proper storm drains that we need to put in.
Very good. Caller, we've got Denny back on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing here is that we're trying to modify a poor design to begin with, which is always a major challenge. Because if you have a blank slate, you can always do it, the way that you want it to be done, rather than having to try to fix bad thoughts to begin with. Right. And that brings me to the question of crosswalks at Hurley's. I think that would be a horrible idea to put crosswalks at Hurley's. Yeah. Absolutely horrible idea. What given the realities of what we're dealing with, perhaps when you think about public transportation and where people will get on and off, you perhaps want to think about relocating those rather than putting them on the side of the road and say that all of the traffic has to stop to let people across on a main road. That is just going to bring everything to a screeching halt. And I know that the commissioner of police might think that, oh, this is a great idea, let's just slow everything down. But what's the consequences of slowing everything down? That will have a real world impact that he has no concept of, don't care about, his pension is not affected by. That's crap, right? You need people like him to stay away from giving advice on these types of matters. He should stick to fighting crime. Now, I understand he's responsible for traffic, but what we're actually talking about here isn't the desire to slow down. You just rightly pointed out that the modern transportation devices allow us to be able to travel at higher speeds, safer. And so I'm not saying that we should raise the really dumb idea. And in case anyone didn't hear that, it is a dumb idea. No, but this is, and I have one more gripe that I want to talk about, and it's along the same line, because I'm not sure how these things get implemented, but for some reason, really dumb things seem to get implemented. And I'm not blaming the NRA, because I understand how politics and power and stuff works in the Cayman Islands. But you see the crosswalks where people walk up, so they press the button and instantaneously the lights start flashing. Now, if I'm 10 feet away from a crosswalk and I'm doing 25 miles an hour, do you really think I can stop when that person has pressed the button and decided they're going to start walking right away? Yeah. Having that in place is a disaster waiting to happen. And what you need is a delay on that button, so that what happens is that there is an indication to the driver that they need to be aware that in, let's say, 5 or 10 seconds, this is going to turn red and you must stop. Now, if you're within proximity or close proximity of a crosswalk and you're not able to stop, that 5 or 10-second delay will give you time to pass, and then the cars who are behind should see that light flashing, indicating that in a few seconds you're going to be required to stop and can do so safely. You don't want people running into the back of you and then pushing you into the person that's on the crosswalk because the person didn't think it was prudent for them to wait until the traffic has crossed. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Thank you, caller. We do have another caller who's also on the line with us this morning. Good morning, caller. What are your thoughts?
Good morning, Sandy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right. On the topic of the crosswalk, how about we make an overhead park? As they go over the traffic and then can come back the bus stop. That is just my 2 cents.
Okay.
I'm listening.
All right. Thank you, my dear.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
some other suggestions here about an overhead pass. I think somebody else in the comments, Jay, said, why not build a flyover at Hurley's? It's a major bottleneck for the island every afternoon. So tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of a overpass or flyover.
Okay. Well, a lot of a lot of good comments there in the last few segments. Let's address the flyover issue at Hurley's. We are currently looking at a number of options between King's Gym and the Chrissy Tomlinson roundabout, which would be basically where Admiral's Landing, I think it's called, the development. And one of the considerations is having a flyover, and then also having pedestrian bridges or crossways over there, because I think it was Denny that raised the point about having crosswalks across 6 lanes of traffic. We have a number of concerns from the persons within that vicinity, because as you can realize, that's becoming a very mixed use area, with all the condos that you're seeing now on the seaside. And then you've got the persons that are immediately in Old Crew Road and just sort of South Sound. They're concerned, obviously, about their ability to get from where they live over to the Grand Harbor area, which is becoming like a sort of mini Kamana Bay, with the mixed use development and so forth. So again, when we talk about quality of life, the way that the development plan, it sort of went is we only have one corridor through that entire area, and that's the corridor. That's what we call the constrained corridor. That's the only means of access to get out east. So now we're up with this conflict now of trying to increase road capacity, but then also make it safe for those people that live in that immediate or adjacent to that corridor. So this one is a challenge for us. And we're looking now at a number of solutions options that we could probably implement. And I would say within the next 6 to 8 weeks, we should have some solutions that we can share with the public. We'll come out and say, look, these are some of the ideas that the engineers are proposing. We've got a really good engineering firm helping us with that. So we'll have some ideas. In terms of flyovers at the roundabout and even along that section of Crew Road by Lion Center and so forth, the issue again is the availability of land. So we're going to, for example, increase the capacity of that road now to 6 lanes. But if we were to do a flyover, it would mean that we would have to eliminate at least 2 of the lanes to be able to put the support structures for the flyover. So you don't just have a road suspended in midair, just so you need support structures for it. So you need the columns and different things. So that's, again, drilling deep into the ground and putting 30-inch size columns. It's a very, very heavy construction. And while you're doing that, where do you put traffic? So and that's a multi-year project. That's something that would take, 5 years at least to be able to put those types of things in place. And then where do you put all that traffic while you're having all this heavy machinery and putting huge pilings in the road to be able to support an overpass or a flyover? So all these considerations, when you really start to look at it and look at the construction logistics and stuff, it becomes very difficult to be able to implement some of these solutions that people are. It's not that we haven't thought of these. It's just we also have to think of how are we going to
the practicalities of it.
The practicalities, yeah, very good.
So Soka says drivers should be damn thankful that some people are on a bicycle instead of being in another car on the road. So many idiots behind the steering wheel. So she's like, slow down. Poppy says exactly.
One of the other things,
yes.
Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to mention too, in terms of cycling and so forth, and the hotels, the tourism industry has sort of pegged Cayman now as this sort of, you can come to Cayman. So all of the hotels now have scooters and bicycles that you can rent and all these sort of things. So we have to be very careful because what we're telling tourists is that it's okay to come here and then rent a bicycle and ride and so forth. And like I said earlier, we're trying our best now to get these bicycle lane facilities in place. But we also need drivers to be very, very mindful and diligent that there are tourists on our island now that, first of all, they're not familiar with driving on the left. They're not familiar with the roads and so forth, but they want to be able to come to Cayman and get on a bicycle and ride around and explore Kamana Bay or, ride into town and so forth. If you go into Georgetown on certain days, on Saturdays and Sundays, you will actually see tourists riding around on rental bikes and so forth. So we have to be very, very mindful of that. When you go down areas like South Church Street, where it's very narrow, tourists will want to go in certain areas and explore, but they're not familiar with the road conditions as we are. They don't know which areas are narrow or which areas people tend to speed in and so forth. So we have to be, I think it was one of the radios, they always used to say, look out for the white license plates and stuff like that. In other words, be mindful of the rental cars. So I always do that when I'm driving as well. I'm like, who's, sort of who's in rentals and stuff. And you can kind of see them. You can kind of see this person is a visitor to the island and they're not quite familiar with. I've seen examples of like tourists approach roundabouts and then turn immediately right at the roundabout. Because if you're coming from a North American country and you're used to driving on the right, you're approaching a roundabout, even though you're approaching on the left side of the roundabout, your immediate thought is to go right, you see? So all these types of things that we have to be careful of. And
Yes.
So can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
The guy on the crossings, he mentioned about the crossings, the gentleman a while back about the delays on the crosswalks. That is something we can look into as a possibility on that side. But I also want to talk about the education side of part of it, because it's not just the cars that have to be mindful when using these crossings, it's also the pedestrian. And they have to they can't just walk in. When they press the button, they just should not just walk into the road. They actually need to pause and look for vehicles, because obviously cars don't stop on a dime. So it's a combination of both the driver and the pedestrian that need to be mindful and aware of how the crossing works. Because you can't just, the car has to stop, but the car may be too close to that crossing to stop. So and when they're approaching that crosswalk, they need to look both ways, press the button, pause, look again, and then cross.
Yeah.
So it's not just the car who has to be aware, it's also the pedestrian.
That particular crosswalk system that we're using was actually developed in Florida. They tested it in Florida for quite a while. And most people that go to Miami will realize that they were actually at Miami International Airport. They had them for quite some time. And then they started to, once the US DOT adopted those, then they started to test them on low volume and low speed roads, and they found that there was success with those, and then they started to adopt them. Now the thing to know about those is that those are not recommended for roads that have speeds over 30 miles an hour. So you wouldn't put that type of crosswalk system on high speed roads. We were very hesitant about putting them on West Bay Road to begin with. So we started, the first place we tested them, I think, was at the Westin. So if you recall, we had them at the Westin for quite some time before we decided then to introduce them a little bit further along the corridor. So we saw West Bay Road as a 25 miles an hour road. It shouldn't be traversed any higher speed than that. We've also went and you notice we've reduced the width of the center lane down to 9 feet wide, and that's to basically so that people don't use the center lane as a speedway.
Right.
Because we were very cognizant of the incident. If you remember the incident of the pedestrian being hit near the Strand.
Oh, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and that's sort of thing that we don't want. We don't want tourists to come to our island and then get knocked over by a speeding car or what have you, or errant vehicle. So the thing to remember with those is, as Marion was pointing out, is that the actual user of the crosswalk has a lot of responsibility, and so you don't just dart across the road. Once you push the button is really meant to be sort of just a advisory, or just to alert the driver that someone is attempting to cross. Now, what we've seen in a number of occasions is basically misuse or abuse of that system by the pedestrian itself. We've seen cyclists just basically ride right across there. We've seen people run across, and that's the incorrect way to use those. What should happen is that the pedestrian should approach, press the button, the lights will activate, but they wait for the motorist to be able to see them. So there's a reaction time where the motorist is able to discern that someone is attempting to cross, and then they cross when it's safe to do so. It doesn't give you a license to just cross into the road at will.
Yeah, because I think some time ago there was some misinformation out there where people thought it said in the traffic law that once you step your foot on the crosswalk, then you had the right of way. But I always tell people, I don't care what the road traffic rules may say. I've never seen a vehicle in a hospital. Like I've never seen a car in a hospital bed, but I've seen people. So use a little bit of common sense there. Sue says it's a nightmare to cross from the Hurley side to go into South Sound. Jesse also says that these crosswalks are also very, very dangerous. So we've got Denny back on the line. Good morning, Denny.
I might have to come and work with you guys now. I forgot to say that I saw where you guys erected hazard signs on South Church Street near walls and by that large almond tree that's there. And I like the effort that I see the NRA making in trying to point out the dangers of that area. It shows that you're interested in saving lives. But I think that somehow we need to try to get that portion of the road corrected a little bit, because it's very tight. And you can look at the almond tree and you can see that many people have hit the almond tree. Personally, I believe the almond tree should be moved, despite my appreciation for the signs. It's very dangerous, and I understand that we're trying to transition from an old way of traveling to having a better improved system, and there's pains in achieving that, but hopefully we can get the people in that area to see the wisdom of facilitating the NRA and correcting that problem. So
all right.
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much. All right. So speaking of road safety and drivers this morning, I have someone who's just sent the following in. So let me just show you guys why the NRA has and the police have such a difficult job when it comes to road safety, and they really need the public to be, I suppose, more conscious drivers and more considerate drivers. So here is a vehicle. This is a truck that is coming out of, well, it seems like the truck is just parked there. So someone has literally sent this to us and they said, can you please address this? I'm coming out of Burger King on the waterfront and I cannot see the road because this truck is parked right there. So this is now blocking traffic coming out of Burger King first thing in the morning. People might be grabbing a quick, whatever, Burger King breakfast special or whatever, trying to rush and get to work. And now she can't see coming out on the main roadway because this truck has decided to park in sort of, I think there's a building right there, but essentially they parked parallel to this. And now coming out of Burger King, she simply can't see. And this creates a dangerous situation for her because, of course, if she is trying to sneak, you kind of scoot forward, you keep scooting, people flying down South Church Street, I think that is, or is that North Church Street? North Church Street. They probably wouldn't see her and end up, clipping her front end. So I think there's a lot of things as drivers, even if you pull off the road, you have to do so safely, and you need to be considerate of other drivers. Like, okay, if I park here, can people see around me? Am I blocking anybody's view? That sort of thing. So we do have a caller on the line as well. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, honey child. How are you today? My voice is back.
Oh, wonderful. We're doing good. How are you?
I am blessed and highly favored beyond all measures. Good morning to my good friend Edward and Marian from NRA. Good morning.
Yes.
Morning.
You're in a good mood today. What's going on?
Oh, yes. I'm blessed and highly favored as usual. I would like to I actually agree with the last caller. I don't know if it was Danny, but I agree with him. As president for Cayman Action Committee and a very active advocate in Cayman and throughout all our communities, I do agree that my first priority is always safety. I do agree that tree needs to be removed. Safety comes first. In our communities, we have issues, especially in the Windsor Park areas. You have a serious safety issue. In case of emergency vehicles needs to get in, you have on Templeton Street, Tempest Way, and Templewood, you have vehicles being parked on two sides of the road. One vehicle can barely get through during the night. If an ambulance needs to get in, if a fire truck needs to get in, it is going to be a serious issue. I believe in being proactive and nipping the problem in the bud before it actually happens. So that is something I'm seriously encouraging the TMP board to look into to see how they can assist, say with safety-wise, yellow lines or no parking signs. Also, I have a question regarding giveaway signs. Because we have giveaway signs at the roundabout, the little small roundabout coming out of Windsor Park onto Smith Road. Nobody wishes to give way coming from the stoplight going to the hospital. Nobody wishes to give way in that point. What can be done to better or to let people understand that it's no longer a straight drive-through, it's give way? So,
Yeah, I
mean, that is something that... Go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, I've been made aware of that issue recently, and I think I did witness it myself. So I think we did more signage, but I think what we're going to try to do as well, we've just ordered a number of these, is we're going to start to now put in pavement signage as well. So not just, a sign that's on the, on a post, so the giveaway, but we can actually now, we have the ability to be able to put the giveaway markings in the road itself, in the pavement. So that, because then I realize there's an issue there at that particular roundabout where persons don't seem to be aware or not giving way to the traffic. So that's one of those that we're going to look very intently on and make some changes, put some countermeasures in place to try to alleviate that issue.
Okay. All right, folks. We're going to take just a little bit of a news break and give Marion and Edward there just a minute to breathe and give you an update on what we now know about the situation, folks, in the UK, and then we'll come back to them. We've got about 20 minutes or less in the program. We'll read some of your comments. So we now know, again, the situation with the Queen is considered to be quite serious, as she has been, quote unquote, placed under medical supervision. The entire family is now by her side. 96-year-old monarch's health is of grave concern. So a statement was issued earlier this morning by Buckingham Palace to say that she is comfortable at Balmoral, which is the castle in Scotland where she spends her summers. And, they've made this announcement for good reason, is what everyone is saying. Both Prince Charles, who is the heir to the throne, and his wife Camilla arrived earlier. They traveled to Balmoral from Clarence House, and also Prince William made the journey, but his wife Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, has remained at their home in Windsor because of the children. And then we have recently gotten confirmation that both Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, will be traveling to Scotland as well. So they were in Europe. It doesn't say exactly where in Europe they were, but they are making their way to Scotland as we speak. So basically, Prince Edward and his wife Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, Princess Anne, pretty much the entire royal family that's considered immediate family is making their way to be with the Queen. And again, this is after the last 24 hours, growing concerns. She canceled a meeting with the Privy Council, and she also, was advised to take some rest after meeting with the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom on, I want to say, was that on Tuesday? Gosh, the days are kind of blurring together, but yes. So that's the latest that we have. And I think, the fact that everyone is making their way there now is an indication of what's probably most likely going to be, a royal funeral, a royal death and a royal funeral. So other immediate family now have all made their way to the Queen's bedside at Balmoral. And we understand that Harry and Meghan have canceled their Well Child Awards visit, which they had scheduled for tonight, apparently. So they've canceled that appearance. So they were in London planning to go to that event this evening. Okay, so that's what we've got. We will certainly continue to monitor the situation, and as any new developments come in, we will advise you all. And at this point, she's still hanging in there, 96 years old, and getting visitors at her bedside, which is the first time, obviously, that this has happened with this particular Queen. All right, so let's bring our guests back in. So again, we have representatives from the National Roads Authority in the studio with us this morning. They've been here since 8 o'clock. So if you missed out, you missed an excellent opportunity to ask questions. So we have the head of the NRA and oh gosh, Miss Marion, I always forget your official title, but she's a planner. So she's also here. Yes, talking about all things sort of roadway. Wanted to clear up a few things with the East-West Arterial. So Mr. Edward Howard is joining us, and Miss Marion Pandui. So let's go back to some of your questions. So Jay has a question and a combination comment. Says Hurley's needs to have a bridge. It's dangerous. Pedestrians have no way to cross. It put the cars in the top so that they don't have to stop, and then a lower roundabout with one lane and a pedestrian crossing plus bikes. So that sounds like a little bit more of a complex bridge system or overfly. The roads are too wide. Jay continues and says the roads are too wide look at European design for cities, narrow roads like SMB, slow the traffic, plus islands in the middle.
Yeah. So you see, like that comment there now is one of the things we were talking earlier about with the roundabouts and so forth. Like, so that the French, a lot of the European countries, their philosophy is much narrower lanes, slower speed. So it's a culture that has developed over the years. And then they also have, a lot of them have much more robust mass transit options as well. You know, you can go by tram, by bus, and what have you. Cycling. Some of those countries, they have about as much as 60% of their, only about 60% cars, and then 40% travel by bicycle or by transit. We unfortunately, kind of going back to the way we've developed in our model, the way we've grown the country, is that we've sort of taken on the US sort of approach to transportation, where it's mostly car centric. And that's something that will take several decades, I think, to change. And if we can get more towards the way the Europeans view transit or transport, because we've all grown to, even when we go into town, for example, we go down to town and we want to go to the courthouse or to the bank and stuff. We want to be able to drive right to the front door and park our cars and stuff like that. So
exactly,
we've become very in love or fascinated with the vehicle. Whereas in a lot of other countries, that's not the case. It's like you can live and have quality of life without having a car or having to use a car all the time. Like I said, you're seeing it.
Cycling,
Cycling, yeah. And I think the economics, the economy is going to drive a lot of that, as well as, like I said, the tourism sector, as well as the way that they're promoting the island in terms of being a cycle-friendly environment. So we have to do our part to try to facilitate that in terms of the road infrastructure, but we also need the public, the motoring public, to be conscious of that there are other vulnerable road users out there now, and those numbers are increasing. Yeah, so in terms of the narrower lanes, we've started to do that on West Bay Road. In other places, we're making the lanes a little bit narrow. Now that has, it's detractors as well. There's a lot of people that don't like that, especially the truckers. So we get a lot of complaints from the truckers. Oh, the lanes aren't wide enough, especially going into roundabouts and stuff. We get truckers complaining that the lanes they need to be wider and so forth. Again, that's they're carrying a longer load, wider load, and they feel that they should be able to do that and then negotiate at a reasonable operating speed as well. So people have different.
Yeah, because with the truckers, people they are allowed to straddle those lanes on the roundabout, and cars should be cognizant of that. That the fact that if you have a big truck, they have big blind spots as well.
Yeah,
you need to don't ride up right next to them.
Yeah,
back off a little bit because they may straddle that lane to get around the roundabout.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street there.
The loads can tip. You can have cases too, especially anyone who's driving like a tanker or stuff, where you have liquids and stuff, water, any sort of fluid. As you're negotiating a roundabout and turning, then that fluid is moving back and forth, and that can cause, the vehicle to tip over as well. We've seen, we've had some overturning vehicles on our roads. Not as much as I've seen in other countries, especially like in the UK, that happens quite often. And that has to do with basically the center of gravity, driver experience as well, and how capable the driver is. And then also sometimes it has to do with the center of gravity, because the higher the center of the load is above the road, then that creates a turning moment on that, and it will actually cause the vehicle to tip. So we have to be very careful how we drive and operate around heavy vehicles. And most truck drivers will tell you trucks can't stop on a dime. If you see a truck that's loaded, you create that extra space between you and the truck, because that truck cannot just stop, on a dime when they're when they're carrying heavy loads. So.
And truckers shouldn't speed either. So
yes.
Yeah. So we're getting on the whole concept of education, and we're going to try to do our part. Even through your medium, to try to bring that message across and try to educate more people. One of the unfortunate things, and Marion and I always discuss this from the road safety aspect, is that we unfortunately have lost any sort of road safety advocacy groups on island. We used to have a group called Street Skills, and then we also had the CIRSAC, which was the Cayman Islands Road Safety Advisory Committee. We had MatSafe, we had other groups, and we've lost that over the years, and we would like to really see that sort of come to fruition again. And it's going to take an effort. It'll be largely private sector driven, we hope. And that would be, a lot of safety-minded folks, like a lot of the callers that we've had on today, and like come together with whether it's with the service groups or the insurance companies and what have you, to create these types of committees and groups that will, work along with us, work along with the police, and constantly feed information to us to help us to develop that partnership when it comes to road safety, because that's really what we need.
Absolutely.
That's been lacking around for quite a while.
All right. Jay also makes a question about American street signs. I think the logical answer for that is probably some 80% of the visitors to the Cayman Islands actually come from North America, Jay. So that's why we use miles per hour and why we use American kind of street signs as well. So Jonathan says yes.
Also the reverse, because more and more of us Caymanians are driving in the US as well. So it helps us in that regard as well. I mean, I remember in my college days and stuff, when I was over in the States and driving, there was a lot of signs that were not familiar to me because I grew up here and, learned under our road code and so forth. So it helps us because we're 85% tourists are from North America, and then the connection that we have with the U.S. as well. A lot of us, I would say, a large percentage of Caymanians actually do rent vehicles in the U.S. and drive in the U.S. So it helps in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. Jonathan says, put those flyover roads down. I guarantee you a drunk driver is going to fly off of that bridge and into somebody's house. And that's why I say put a bridge over the North Sound. At least if a drunk driver comes off the bridge, they land in the water. Okay. So again, Sue supports that something has to be done at that roundabout by Hurley's for people to cross over to get to South Sound Road. Jonathan says put some big columns in the North Sound. Oh my goodness, for a bridge, and they can work as artificial reefs in the Sound. You should probably talk to some of the environmentalists there, Jonathan, about that idea. Jesse,
Sandy, just for discussion purpose, Sandy, if one of the options, and I can let this be known now, is one of the considerations for the Hurley's roundabout or Grand Harbor roundabout would be to either replace the roundabout with a full-on traffic signal or signalize the roundabout entirely. Now, what that would mean is that would answer the question or solve the issue of people being able to cross safely there, because they would basically cross at a traffic light. But you can immediately then see the other side of the coin. The concerns with that is that also then increases the congestion,
right,
or the travel time. So there's this balance that we have to try to maintain. So we're using our model currently to figure out whether that is a viable solution, because if you've got is that 4 legs, it's got four arms on it, you can have people crossing in 4 different directions at one time, and it would basically bring that intersection to a halt, just for 1 or 2 pedestrians to cross. So there's all these little issues you have to. I remember years and years ago, we used to have a traffic signal by the old Hyatt Hotel, on West Bay Road, and it was amazing how that backed traffic all the way up into West Bay, because literally every time a pedestrian wanted to cross, they would come, press the button, activate the light to cross, and it just had a domino effect of, in terms of the congestion. So those are some of the things that we have to consider, because even though you would have the 3-lane capacity there, you would then have to stop all 3 lanes for one person to cross. And you have to then give them at least 40 seconds or 30 to 40 seconds to be able to cross.
Safely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it each time a person activates the crosswalk at that intersection, you'd probably lose a minute in travel time at that point. And then that would propagate all the way back through into town.
So Jesse says many cities are removing their raised roads as there's a huge noise impact on the areas that go through. Reference Oakland, California, and the roadway impacts on neighborhoods. So again, another consideration there: noise pollution.
Again, quality of life issues. The other thing someone asked, I wanted to address this one about the pedestrian flyovers or pedestrian overheads at Hurley's and other areas. There's a recent study, this came out of Trinidad, where they spent millions of dollars and put, I think, 10 or more of these pedestrian overpasses on their roadways, and they basically found that it was just money wasted, because a lot of people, again, going back to cultural differences, people just refuse to use them. So we've been talking to the consultants in Pennsylvania and other parts. So it really depends. In some areas they're heavily used, and in other areas people just don't take to them at all, and they would rather risk crossing, at grade than to go up into some sort of pedestrian overpass. Now, a lot of factors would be also, how well they're designed as well, are they well lit? Are they safe? Because, people might have the fear of getting mugged in there or something, or, they don't feel safe kind of passing up over the road in some sort of tunnel or what have you. But we're looking at it at a number of different designs, different options. They have some that they have like a scissors ramp, kind of like the little scissors ramp that they use at the Cayman Airways to get on and off the airline. So you'd have something like that where a wheelchair could go up, a scissors ramp off to the side and then up, and then you cross over the highway and then back down the other side using a scissors ramp as well, rather than having to climb a flight of stairs or take an elevator up and cross. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations, and what we will do is as we get these ideas, we'll just sort of bring them out to the public and let just so that the public is a little bit more aware of the factors that we have to consider when we implement certain things. Because like I said earlier in the program, sometimes we probably don't do a good enough job of letting the public know what all of the considerations are, the factors. You hear people saying, "Oh, why don't they just do a bridge? Why don't they?" There's a lot of different things.
Yes, and to that point, Sabrina says, "Thank you, NRA, for explaining in further detail why some of these suggestions that people keep saying won't work. Keep up the good work." So it's really just a matter of communication and getting the message out there. Miss Brenda says, on the one hand, part of her traffic problem is the roads are designed American, not British, the way Caymanians were taught to drive. But she also says to get rid of all of the roundabouts, which is a very British thing. So she says, how about stop with all of the roundabouts? 4-way stops would be much more practical. If you notice, 4-way stops are American and the roundabouts are British. So the one element that you like happens to be an American traffic control situation. You seldom see these roundabout concepts in the US. But Bridget says the stop and go light at Hurley's roundabout from South Sound was a great start and help to incorporate that concept along with crossing safely would be desirable for other roundabouts. And consider all the pedestrians, not just cultural, older people, stairs, strollers, family, groceries, heavy cargo, tools, etc., and tourists. All right, folks. So we're just about out of time here this morning. We want to give our guests a final opportunity to perhaps make some comments before the show ends in about a minute and a half. So, Mr. Edward Howard and Ms. Marian Pandu, any final thoughts this morning?
Yeah. So just thank everyone for listening to us this morning, and just to kind of recap where we started initially, which the discussion was about the East-West expansion, and just to reiterate again to the public that we are following all of the steps that are required under the National Conservation Act, specifically the EIA directive, which requires us now to do this environmental impact assessment study, which we think is going to take maybe 12 to 16 months to complete. And again, that we have engaged with the help of the Environmental Assessment Board, have engaged a very capable consultancy firm to accomplish this task. And then we've also got our own team as well of experts that's going to help oversee the work as well. So we're pretty confident in that regard. And then we want to ensure the public that we are following all of the steps that are required by law. This project is going to be very controversial, as with a lot of projects that that have anything to do that have this sort of considerable environmental impacts. But we have to weigh a lot of other considerations for this East-West expansion, in terms of the other benefits that it's going to provide for the island, not just travel time reduction, but in order for us to be able to grow infrastructure. A lot of the discussions that we've had this morning in terms of not having ample sidewalks, not having all of these things that we need on our road, a lot of these will be addressed in this East-West expansion. So we'll be doing it right with this design, rather than trying to fix problems from the past, And then, so we're providing the country with a fully climate resilient roadway that will be able to provide sustainable development in the future. No, like I said, that doesn't come without environmental risk, and that's the reason for the study. The study has to really look at that and say, okay, what are these risks, and how can we mitigate?
How can they be mitigated? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
My only thought would be that in relation to the East-West Arterial expansion is that the public will be informed on a regular basis in terms of what we are doing and how it's moving forward. And we will do the education camp. They won't be left in the dark. In other words, that we'll do things of this sort in the future. Websites will be updated, et cetera, et cetera. So the public just to keep informed and just keep looking out for it.
Okay, and Denver says, great show. Government should have these educational and informational programs implemented on here frequently. So he quite enjoyed the show. And I must say that the NRA has committed to coming onto the program once per month. We kind of missed last month because poor Marian, I think the COVID caught her, which is something that's still impacting a lot of us. But she's back in the saddle. And of course, this is Edward Howard's first time in the program. So we do want to give him a warm welcome. And as he can see, it wasn't that bad. Fielded a few calls and comments, but really the educational process, as Denver points out, is absolutely necessary and important. Miss Sue seconds that. She says, yes, let the people know what's going on. And it's as simple as that. People just want to be in the know. So we again wish to thank our guests. We are continuing to monitor the situation in the UK. As you can see from your screen, a private jet has brought in 7 additional members of the royal family who arrived at Aberdeen, and they're all traveling to be at Balmoral this morning to be at the Queen's side. So folks, this is a major, major development. All news, both in the UK and around the world, carrying the story that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's health has deteriorated, and the word just lost me, but the royals have issued a statement this morning in relation to her health, basically to say that she's under physician's care and she is resting peacefully. So all indications are that this could very well be the end of our queen. And so we will, I'm sure, get official statements if anything happens from the local officials. I'm pretty sure the governor and the premier are also watching this news situation with great interest for any developments. So as soon as we, and lots of messages are coming through. So the Muslim Council in Great Britain, for example, has issued, a message of support of the Queen. Buckingham Palace is the one who issued the statement about her medical condition earlier this morning as well. So physicians concerned about her health. So we'll keep you all updated. Please stay tuned to CMR. We'll post stuff on the website as and if there's anything breaking that happens, and of course on our social media platforms. And if need be, we can do a little bit live a bit later on this morning as well. So again, big shout out to the NRA. Thank you guys so much for coming on the program today. Really appreciate it. We'll see them again next month. And just as an FYI, I know that there was a lot of safety concerns that were raised this morning. We will have the RCIPS. Kevin has booked them for next week, Wednesday, to come on and talk about road safety. So, of course, the NRA is welcome to jump in on that show as well. But we do have confirmation that the RCIPS will be able to join us next week. So that sounds fantastic. So keep it locked here. Again, thanks, NRA, for the wonderful job that you guys are doing and continue to do to provide safe roads here in the Cayman Islands for us, safe and effective road systems. And there's a lot really that they do over at the NRA that I think a lot of times goes, unrecognized, unappreciated. And so we will be having more of their services featured on this platform for sure. And stay tuned now for our local news. Here is what Kevin Watler brought for you this morning.
Hello, I'm Kevin Watler, and this is your CMR Daily Buzz. The Cayman Islands Health Services Authority has introduced a new online payment system, a more convenient option for patients to pay their bills and make payments securely online. HSA said the online payment system was implemented following evaluation of patient feedback and the HSA's commitment to providing an improved patient experience. The Cayman Islands Ministry of Education has announced a temporary waiver of grade requirements for students seeking to qualify for Education Council scholarships to begin undergraduate studies in the fall of 2022 at accredited, recognized overseas institutions as well as those seeking to begin further education locally. Overseas undergraduate scholarships are administered by the Secretariat Unit and awarded by the Education Council to Caymanian applicants fully accepted to accredited, recognized overseas institutions and who have obtained certain grade benchmarks from a variety of programs. The temporary waiver will apply to those who had been conditionally approved to receive a scholarship for overseas undergraduate studies. The National Trust for the Cayman Islands has announced the successful completion of its pilot tour guide training program, which saw 18 participants receive certificates as tour guides. The program was offered to residents, especially those business professionals in the tourism industry. Sponsors RC Foundation Cayman and Work have been credited for making the pilot program a success.
Stormwatch 2022 is brought to you by Home Gas, your propane experts before, during, and after the storm.
The National Hurricane Center is tracking 4 tropical systems. Hurricane Danielle is going to turn subtropical soon, and it's not a system we really need to worry about. Now, Hurricane Earl is bad news for Bermuda. Although Earl's center is forecast to pass southeast of Bermuda, hurricane conditions are still possible. Storm surge is also a concern and will start from now until Earl passes Bermuda. The third system being monitored may become another named system at any moment. The good news is it's forecast to stay away from the Caribbean Sea, so it's not something we really need to watch too closely. The system behind that one, however, is something we do need to monitor. As time goes by, it could get organized and develop into a named storm, so we'll need to watch it very closely for sure. We are in September, which is when the tropics get a lot more active, so be storm ready, Cayman. Now for your CMR weather update, it's brought to you by WG Charters. Sunrise at 6:11, mostly sunny skies. temperatures rises to the high 80s, and when the high temperature is at 87 degrees Fahrenheit and relative humidity is at 71% like the forecast calls for, the temperature will feel around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, then the sun sets at 6:34. At nighttime, the temperature falls to the high 80s. Looking forward, similar weather conditions are expected. Remember, it's summertime, so those hot days, warm nights with scattered showers are very typical for this time of year. CMR weather updates are brought to you by WG Charters. They offer private boat trips for a great price, so we encourage you to support them. Now for some regional and international news. Bermuda's governor announced that the United Kingdom has blocked the Bermuda governor's controversial bid to legalize the use and production of cannabis in the British Overseas Territory. In March, Parliament again passed the controversial legislation making it legal to grow and sell cannabis in Bermuda. There was no immediate reaction from the government, but last year, the Premier said if royal assent was not given to the bill, it would destroy relations between Bermuda and Britain. The New York governor has announced plans for the establishment of a Caribbean trade office to support and encourage new economic activities for New York businesses. Governor Kathy Hochul said this new foreign office will assist New York State companies with international sales and exporting their products and services to the Caribbean region. The governor also said the Caribbean is a growing market for New York State businesses and communities, stating that New York is expanding its network of global office coverage to meet the additional demand. New York State is ending a 28-month-old COVID mandate requiring masks on public transport, Governor Kathy Hochul says. Masks will no longer be required in airports and rideshare vehicles, she added. The state introduced the mandate in April 2020 as the virus was spreading throughout New York City. But now wearing masks will be optional, the governor said, citing recent guidance from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Ukraine's President Zelensky says he has good news claiming the recapture of several settlements from Russia. Rumors have swirled for days about possible breakthrough in eastern Kharkiv region, but with no word from Ukraine officials. Mr. Zelensky declined to name which places had been retaken, saying now is not the time to name them. Separately, U.S. officials said Ukraine was making slow but meaningful progress against Russian forces. That's it for now on Daily Buzz. Thank you for joining me. Please stay safe and God bless.